and welcome to another APT and cybersecurity LinkedIn Live event. My name is Aaron Stillwell, and I'm joined by my co-host Alex Mavro and special co-host Bonnie Stith. I'm really looking forward to this conversation because the challenges we're exploring aren't abstract or theoretical. They're deeply human, and they shape the way security teams function every single day. Our session is called Human-Centered Challenges, Burnout, Training Gaps, and CISO Empowerment. Kind of gets to the heart of what it means to lead and sustain resilient cybersecurity organizations. We're fortunate to have Jeff Brown with us, a leader who has navigated these pressures firsthand and brings a grounded, practical perspective to what it takes to support teams and empower CISOs to operate effectively in an increasingly complex threat landscape. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Bonnie. I'm honored to be here today and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So first question is, you've led cybersecurity across government, industry, and a whole bunch of advisory roles. What experiences most shaped how you think about people, not just technology and security?
Yeah, it's a great question too. And I think fundamentally a lot more of our job than we like to admit is actually about people. Being a CISO is one of the few jobs in a company that has to actually talk to every single employee. That's just not that common, right? Like the CEO might have to do that, maybe the head of HR. Other than that, the CISO is the one who has to really make sure that we're getting messages across to everybody from administrative assistants all the way up to the board of directors. And guess what? That's not an easy thing to do. I think when we look at communication, I did write a book on communication, which is a long story. But if you'd asked me when I was, maybe 10 years ago, even if I would write a book on cybersecurity communication, that wouldn't have been high on the list. And yet, when I looked at the problem, it's a big problem. A lot of us have come up through technical ranks, and then when we put a CISO in front of the board of directors, sometimes they just don't have the right messaging. And then also, even when you get down in the organization, you have to talk to frontline, you have to talk to call centers, things like that. Getting the message across to somebody isn't that easy. And I think I've actually studied some of these communication problems. Typically it can take 7 to 14 times hearing the same message before it actually kind of gets through to some people. And that's not because people are stupid. It's because people are busy. People have a lot on their minds already. If you look at the theory of cognitive load, I mean, it's just like, even while you're talking, listening to the webcast, you might be doing email, you're concentrating on 3, 4, 5 different things. Guess what? You're not doing any of them really well. And people hate hearing that too, because they like to think I'm an efficient multitasker. It's like, yeah, you're probably half-assing everything that you're doing, right? Like that's just not the right way to do things. But that's one of the big communication challenges. We see this all the time where humans kind of do the wrong thing, right? Like, and we have good security controls, we have good tools in place, and then somebody says like, yeah, no, that's okay, I'm going to go around it, right? Like, and then we see that all the time. I mean, unfortunately, we see people with new tools, new toys, and they don't necessarily engage the security team. So, I mean, it's a big problem, the human issue.
So you kind of went through this a little bit, but your books kind of focus heavily on communication and resilience. How do you believe those skills matter as much as technical expertise for today's CISOs?
Yeah, great question. Because I mean, like I said, a lot of CISOs have come up through technical ranks, and it's sometimes really difficult to translate. Let me talk a little about like speaking to a board of directors, right? And I'm part of NACD. I'm on a couple boards myself, so I mean, I kind of get like the conversation. But like sometimes we just don't dumb things down enough. And then other times we go in without having a very clear, like kind of, so what? Business leaders actually, this is a kind of a misnomer, but like a lot of business leaders actually do understand risk. They may not understand cybersecurity. They may not even understand cybersecurity risk, but they understand business risk. And what we find is that like when we translate things to the right language, let me give you an example. I mean, if I go in and say, oh, your average data breach costs $20 million, they're supposed to get all excited about that. However, if I went in with the different messaging of like, if our business is down for 2 days, first of all, that number is probably 4 or 5 times bigger
Oh, yeah.
And second of all, it's a number that everybody understands. Like, yeah, if we're not in operations for 4 days straight because we have a ransomware attack or something like that, they understand that risk very, very clearly. But it's up to us to make sure that the message is clear, that it's actually getting through, and that ultimately we're paying attention, right? Like a lot of times people take presentations into the board and they're reading the presentation instead of reading the room. You got to read the room when those kind of conversations. Are people confused? Are they paying attention? Do they understand what you're saying? And making sure that you're engaging at the right level, because if 7 to 14 times, I could guarantee it's going to be 132 times if you're not even getting an engaged audience. It does take two to communicate, and you have to make sure that I'm talking, you're listening, we are connecting with each other. There's a feedback loop in terms of, are you confused? Are you actually hearing what I'm saying? And then really making sure that the actual message is getting across. And the best way to do that is either rephrasing things or just making sure that that they understand, right? Ask.
I think we all understand if you have children saying things 100 times and them still not understanding.
Yeah.
It's part of the game.
Can I piggyback on that with another question? And so, Jeff, you talk about the communication with the board. I mean, I'm on some boards and I am the cyber person on the board. What kind of communication could a CISO have with the board member who is the cyber, if you will, person to help better get their message across on the board?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, some boards don't really have a cyber person. Some boards don't even really have a technology person. So, it depends on what kind of board you're dealing with. However, if there is somebody who's even moderately skilled, if you can befriend that person offline, right, outside of the boardroom, that is now your best ally, because that's somebody that you can take messages to and say, will this resonate at the table? Right? Like, will this actually make sense to your peers? Is this something like, and in some cases, they can become your biggest advocate too. Like, they'll actually help you get the message across to other board members. It's a fantastic opportunity if you can take it. Sometimes companies, the board is a sort of this entity that nobody goes near, that nobody can get near. But if you can establish that relationship, you now have a friend at the table, which I think is a really good thing. And again, we want to make sure that our messaging is very clear, very crisp. If you've actually, since you've been in board meetings, you understand, like, they're not just sitting there all day waiting for a cybersecurity update, right? Like, usually you've got 15, 20 minutes and they've got 100 subjects. They meet quarterly, maybe. We've got so much stuff to go through. I've had boards where sometimes, unfortunately, they get up and say, oh, the security guy's here. It's time to go get another coffee. I'll be back. It's not you personally, it's just them, right? And you have to deal with what you have. So I think that's a really important piece, but really making sure that you have some of those sounding boards that you can sort of practice, and don't go into a board without practicing. I see that all the time. People like to wing it, or they're just hoping for the best. Hope is not a strategy with the board of directors, right? They're all very busy. They don't want to take a lot of time to pick through your message and try to understand, what are you actually saying? And my number one advice for boards and speaking with boards is have a so what factor. If you don't have a so what factor, meaning like, I'm going to give an update and your update should say, okay, so what, right? Like, and if your update doesn't really kind of resonate and it doesn't really have a so what factor, either it's the wrong update to give, or you need to go back and figure out, like, why should they care about this? So what, right? Like, that's such two easy words to ask to make sure that your message is going to be important enough to hear.
Yeah.
So I do have a question, kind of going back, as Connecticut's first CISO, what human or leadership challenge surprised you the most once you stepped and kind of into that role?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I'd spent most of my career in financial services, about 25 years or so in financial services doing cybersecurity. Then I took a left turn and decided to become the CISO for the state of Connecticut, which was really an interesting job in that, like, when you work at a bank, you have kind of like, everybody does finance. Most people have a computer. Most people know, like, how to operate a computer and things like that. But in state government, you also have, you have DMV clerks, you have hospital technicians, you have all kinds of, engineers for transportation. It's a very, very different audience, and you have to adapt to that audience. You have to really, kind of understand, like, maybe we shouldn't do anti-phishing for people who don't have computers, right? Like, there's certain modifications that you need to make as a CISO in that type of environment to make sure that you really are being heard. And it's also not so much of a compliance environment. It's very easy in a financial institution to say audit requires it, regulators require it, there's a compliance rule. You don't necessarily, you have compliance rules, of course, in state government, but not to the same extent. And in fact, you actually have a number of different ones. You might have HIPAA, you might have CISO, you might have Pub 1075, you have all these different rules that only apply to really small pockets. It's not like the entire organization has to do GDPR. Those kind of things make it a little bit more of a challenging environment, but also just that level of just making sure that you're communicating at the right level for people who maybe just don't spend all day on computers. I mean, the state has hospitals, they have doctors. They're not sitting there reading email and clicking on links all day, right? So, I mean, you have to really adapt your messaging.
But even in the healthcare, as far as we know, there are vulnerabilities over there. And and I'm not speaking about let's say the OS that it's using, because I know it's a different kind of OS, like not similar with Microsoft, but more, let's say more with Linux, because even that it has some comments. I know from my father. My father is working in the healthcare with let's say with the service devices and all those kind of maintenance and so on. Also installing from scratch, and also installing the room where you have servers and so on. So I know how it's working. How those are, let's say, scanned for the vulnerabilities? Is the patching done differently from others? How that is working?
So it depends, right? Like in the state, we were very federated, and in many companies I've worked at, we're very federated. So sometimes you're centrally patching everything from headquarters level. Other times you're just reporting from headquarters level. I mean, ultimately, no matter whether you're in a company, a state government, a federal government, you want to have that overall view of risk, meaning what does everybody look like? But in some cases, you really have independent places doing it. Like, there's a concept in government called quasi-agency, which is not really like they're not really on your network. They're sort of state government. Good example of this is the Connecticut Airport Authority. It's like they weren't really state employees. They're kind of a state entity.
Well,
but they're not necessarily like kind of part of the network and things like that. So, I mean, like it gets very murky very quick, especially in state government. But I mean, it's an important piece to understand how that happens. And then when we were in Connecticut, a lot of like what we were doing was centralizing IT. That's an easy story to go in when your shop is in order and where you're going into a state agency, kind of saying like, we have 24/7 monitoring, we have patching, we have all of this kind of stuff. What do you have? And usually the answer is like, we have a security person who's out this week. I mean, that's the kind of things that you end up with. So I mean, it's a very easy conversation, I think, when we're centralizing IT in an environment like that. That when you get to the security side of things, not too many people can provide 24/7, 365 coverage. That's really tough. A lot of agencies had a person, a half person, or 0 people.
Yeah, I understand. Cybersecurity conversation often focus on tools because we have to speak about patching, and we know all those things are done with a tool. Even for vulnerability management, it is done with a tool. Of course, over there are also threats, in fact, yet failures are usually human. Where do organizations still underestimate the human factor over here?
Yeah, that's a good question too. And I mean, a lot of it is accountability. So especially when we're in a patching kind of conversation, who is actually accountable for putting that patch on the machine is sometimes a little complicated. So what we see, and I'll give you an example. I mean, you might have a central IT organization that patches the server, but the application on the server, that's a business responsibility. Right? So now you're looking at one server, you've got 2 different groups that are supposed to do things. If I think you have the ball and you think I have the ball, that's not a great setup, right? That means nobody has the ball, and that means that may not get patched, it may get half patched. I mean, all of those kind of problems. Really, I've been in some very big organizations too, where they have, federated IT, and you might have individual CIOs, CTOs in each business unit. And
Yeah.
until you can get your metrics, and this is on the CISO, right? The CISO has to do this. Until you can get your
It is
metrics
similar
to
like in the
say,
banking or financial institutions.
yeah, exactly. Right. And until you can get individuals to understand this is under your control, this is yours to patch, and
Yeah.
you need to patch it. And by the way, it's whatever, 6 months overdue. Until you can kind of get down to that level of conversation, I still see CISOs who show up and they say there's 20,000 servers in the firm and they all need patching, right? And
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just like, I mean, what's mine? What do I need to do to help you, right? Like you have to get down to that level, or else you are going to be kind of the lone wolf.
Yeah, indeed. I still have another question, and then I'll pass, of course, more section burnout and workload to Moni. But before that, from leading the digital workforce, why is resilience now a core of cybersecurity capability rather than a soft skill?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So, a lot of the conversation has shifted to resiliency. And I mean, I think that's a good thing because, I mean, there was a time for people who haven't been in security 30 years like I've been. I mean, there was a time where, I mean, there was a perception of like, well, we hired a CISO, the security problem should go away. We have definitely moved on from that in most firms. I mean, some places that's still prevalent. But really making sure that, that the responsibilities are clear, that individuals know what they're supposed to do. Ultimately, those are the kind of messages that you have to get across. And I mean, that can be very difficult, especially in large organizations. Communication is, I've never seen even moderate sized organizations say communication is fantastic.
No.
That soft skill, like you said, right? Like it's a soft skill. And a lot of people think like, oh, I'm a technician, I don't need soft skills, or that's kind of squishy, I don't want to deal with it. If you can't communicate to somebody, there is a limit on the impact you can make, right? Unless you're working in, you're a coder working on a single thing all by yourself, you don't have a team, that's fantastic. Good luck. But I mean, anything important is going to get done on a team. And if you can't work within that team, and of course, CISOs have to work within the entire company and all of the teams. That's why the job is so incredibly difficult, because you have so many stakeholders. Sometimes our message is not so good, right? You have to slow down. You have to stop. You can't deploy this. We try not to be the department of no, but on the other hand, we also have to make sure we're protecting the whole organization. And sometimes that might be something as simple as a smaller business unit or a smaller state agency, something like that. They think that they're going to accept the risk for something that puts everybody at risk, right? And that's where you really have to step in as a CISO and be able to have the bigger, broader picture of like, we can't have a business unit that doesn't have a firewall because they want fast internet access. That just doesn't work, right? You're putting the entire company at risk, and that's something we can't allow you to do, right? That is, now and then we do have to step up and say no.
Indeed.
But we can't make it a default.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's really, when you're in that place where you feel like you're the person that's saying no all the time, what are the CISOs getting wrong when they start trying to push through burnout?
Yeah, I especially with burnout. So, and it's a really interesting topic because I'm seeing more and more of this coming up. I'm seeing, in fact, I was recently teaching a class and I had a bunch of cybersecurity people in it. And I was very interested to hear when I did a quick poll, I said, how many of you are aspiring to be CISOs? It was almost like crickets. It was almost like nobody wanted to do it. And when I asked, I was kind of curious. I'm like, usually in cybersecurity, you say like top of the chain, that's where I want to be. However, what I was realizing was that a lot of people perceive it as, well, there's personal liability, there's burnout, there's like just all this pressure. There's anybody can get in at any time and that's your problem. A lot of people actually don't want to be CISOs anymore, which I found, first of all, I found a little amazing, a little troubling, but also a little bit amazing. But, it's a lot of it is about burnout and just that kind of thing. Now, we also have to remember as leaders, and this is one of the points I make in the Leading the Digital Workforce book, is that we are setting the tone. I see leaders all the time that are like, oh, you need to take your vacation. And then they don't take theirs. Right? Like they're setting the tone. And the tone is like, you're always around. I should always be around too. And until you really kind of make a firm message like that, I'll give you an example of my head of the SOC at one point. I told her, like, you're out for, I think it was 2 weeks, maybe. We got it. I will personally call you if there's something we need, but otherwise you're not checking email. You're not doing any of that kind of stuff. And I mean, that, she actually came back and said, this was like the first time I actually felt disconnected from work. And there's where burnout comes from, right? Like the fact that you're never disconnecting from work. So, I mean, in some cases you need to establish some limits on what you do. One of the problems I always had in my career was I would commute long commutes. I'd work all day. I would do email and stuff on the way into work. And then on the way back from work, I'd do email. I'd get home, I'd eat dinner real quick and log in again. That's not a recipe for success. That's not how you last 30 years in cybersecurity, right? That's too much. And nowadays I tend to ask myself questions like, is it a Friday afternoon? I'm still doing some email. Is anybody going to read this email today? And if the answer is definitely not, then I mean, why are you writing it? It can wait.
I see a question over in the chat. How do you define burnout? I mean, what's a couple of words that you would put or behaviors that you would say, this is what burnout looks like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that, first of all, burnout is not really enjoying what you're doing. And I mean, I have to say life is short to not enjoy what you do. Cybersecurity tends to pay pretty well, but I can promise you firsthand that if you're in a job that you hate, paying fantastic money,
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't help. It doesn't help. In fact, one of the big banks I used to work for, they did a review of partners who had left the firm. And these are all people making like 8-figure salaries, right? Like these are really the top echelon. And they were just wondering, like, what does it take for someone to walk away from a job that big? Voluntarily, right? Like you're walking away. And the answer was, it wasn't fun anymore. Now, to be fair, it's like, okay, you have enough money, you can certainly be picky and choosy about what's fun and what's not fun. But I mean, the reality is like the money won't make up for a job that you hate. So if you are getting to that point where it's just like, that feels repetitive, it feels mundane, it feels like I'm doing the same things over and over again, it's probably time to think about what's next. Now, some people, they just jump the gun and they'll quit their job and walk out and go find another job. And then find out, like, guess what? You're doing practically the same thing in a different company that might even be worse. So always start within the company that you're at. I mean, I was able to stay in cyber for 30 years, not by doing the same job every day. I mean, I've done practically everything from pushing firewall rules and scanning applications and patching to being a CISO to being a security leader. But even within that, I've also taken on business fraud, privacy, business continuity. New material is important. So keeping engaged in what you do is how you avoid burnout. And then also making sure you are putting some limits on things. Like, you can't work 7 days a week. It becomes, that's called working every day for life, right? Like, I mean, if you work 7 days and you're not taking a break, guess what? Here come the next 7 days and you're going to just keep going. That's not a recipe for long-term success. And I mean, I think we really have to start focusing as an industry a lot more on long-term success.
I think that's a really good one, focusing on long-term success. So many times, I mean, this question is, with more and more added to the CISO job jar, what should CISOs say no to doing? I think that speaks to what should you be deliberately saying, I'm not doing this versus I can't do this. Because we default to I can't, but we can. We don't want to, but we won't say we don't want to. So what should we say no to?
Yeah, good question. And I think the short answer is, first of all, stuff that is completely out of your remit, right? Like, I mean, I've seen records management and stuff like that come over to the CISO, and it's just like, that's probably not a good match. However, I'm a fan of actually saying, sure, we can do that, but not with current staffing, maybe not with current, funding, things like that. I mean, I see people get overwhelmed and like, let's take a merger and acquisition. It's like, well, we don't have time for this. We're running a program day to day, and now we have all this other stuff. Guess what? When someone's buying a company, there's a lot of money flying around. That is an opportunity to make a business case and say, like, we don't have the staffing to be able to do this, but we do need it. And whether we're hiring more people, which everybody always cringes out, we don't want to do this. How about some consultants? How about we bring some consultants in just for this project? We charge that to the M&A, and we get it done that way. They're under our supervision, but ultimately we're not doing the work. That's fine. That kind of stuff works really well. So, I mean, I tend to like saying yes to most things, but with a but, right? It's always like, yes, but, right? Like, we can do that. But I mean, first of all, if it doesn't make sense, it shouldn't be in there, right? Like, because I mean, cybersecurity, I see this way too much. Cybersecurity is not a part-time job. When you have a CISO who's also doing privacy, they're doing business continuity, they're doing fraud, they're doing 18 other things, you've now said that cybersecurity is part-time. And you have to be real cautious with that because it's not a part-time job. There are synergies, right? Like fraud and cybersecurity, I think, are going to be more and more combined in the future because there are synergies. It's like, the big difference is I can see what an attack looks like, and I can usually find that pretty easily. Fraud looks like every other transaction, so it's a little bit more tricky. But I mean, like, I think where there are synergies, we should be trying to say yes. And also, and this is where a lot of CISOs fall flat, make that business case, right? Like the business case for more people, the business case for bringing in consultants, the business case for, how do we get this set up? Not, and you have to do like kind of a who, not how, right? Like it's a lot of times they'll just say, how am I going to get this done? And it's like, you're probably not. You're already at capacity. So either you need to drop some things, or you need to bring in some people, or you also need to, this is an interesting one too, but I mean, a lot of times security people are just fantastic. I mean, like, my team would typically be like 4, 5, 6 security people on the call, and the other people who were supposed to be there didn't show up. That's fine, but like, we don't really need 4, 5, 6 people, right? Like we need 1, 2 people maybe, right? Like, so, I mean, making sure at your own time and make sure that like, are we spending time on the right things? And are there even products that you can buy that sometimes help? I'll give you a quick example of that. But I mean, I used to have a single person doing phishing triage. So whenever somebody reported a fish, this guy had to literally go look at it and decide if it's a fish or not. If he's on vacation, it's not happening this week. And what we didn't understand was we actually had people waiting. They were like literally waiting to hear, I want to click on that link, but I'm a little suspicious. Is it a fish, yes or no? And we weren't getting back to them. And they were like, well, we report these things and you don't get back to us. And we ended up buying a product. And I won't pitch products, but I mean, like we did buy a product that helped us with that. And it freed up that guy's time. Now I can reallocate him to other things. So, I mean, really auditing your time and making sure that like, okay, there are only so many hours in the day. Are all of those hours productive? Are all of those hours really high quality work? And the idea is to kind of have the signal to noise, as high as can be. And a lot of times we'll shoot ourselves in the foot deploying tools like DLP. And then you have security people running after all of these out of context alerts that they don't understand. Is that the best way to do that? Or are there other ways like automatically blocking or actually engaging business managers, things like that?
Well, I mean, that seems like it kind of feeds into your idea of non-judgmental cultures and how those can help in these spaces. What is, first of all, I mean, I'll ask the first question. What is a non-judgmental culture?
Yeah, there's a concept called psychological safety. And really all that means is it's just a fancy term for like, do you feel free to speak up? Do you feel free to speak your mind? Do you feel free that people are are not going to say like, that's a stupid question, or, why are you asking that? Or, a lot of times we'll see people who are, out teching each other. It's like, oh, you don't know that, right? Like, that's not psychologically safe. That's not somewhere where I can raise an issue and say, wait a minute. Really, ultimately, that building that environment, that is up to the leader. The leader needs to create that environment. You can't count on everybody not saying, "Oh, that's a stupid question," but you could definitely count on a leader stepping in and saying there are no stupid questions, right? And making sure that people feel safe raising issues. That is probably, I would say, one of the most important things that a leader of any team can do is making sure that people feel safe to speak up. If I'm going to walk off a bridge and I don't know it, I want my team to tell me that, right? Like, I don't want them to be like, oh, he's always kind of grumpy, and I don't want him to be mad. I'd rather have somebody engaging me and telling me like, this is what's going to happen. But to do that, I need to make myself accessible. I need to make sure that everybody feels safe talking to me. I need to make sure that they don't feel stupid, and I'm not going to make them feel like, you're wasting my time. That is up to the leader, and the leader really sets the tone with that.
Yeah, I had somebody ask me one time, how do you get people to bring you bad news? And I said, I don't punish them when they do.
Yes.
I mean, it's like, this is it. Just don't punish them when they do it. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to hand it back over to Aaron. And that is, with more AI everywhere, how can we use AI to reduce the noise without removing the human judgment?
Yeah, great question. Good. I love it. Because, I mean, we talk all the time about the human in the loop, but we don't talk enough about it. When I look at like AI tools as an example, first of all, the first time I did anything with ChatGPT, I decided to give it a fish. And I knew it was a fish because I've been doing this for a while, so I could kind of see that it was a fish. But I pasted in the headers and I said, tell me if there's anything fishy about this email. Not only did it tell me, but it walked me through exactly why and exactly what. And I was like, this is a first-year cybersecurity analyst right there. And I knew that this was going to be pretty big in the industry. So, I mean, the challenge being that you can't outsource your thinking. The same way that AI tools can't make you a doctor or a surgeon, or, I mean, it can give you some ideas and advice and direction, but if you can't recognize that that's not right. I mean, I still see plenty of things generated by AI that are just wrong. And if you can't recognize that it's wrong, that's a big problem. And I think people are going to get a little bit lazy. I've already seen this. And you can see it even in terms of like even business documents. You'll see like at the very end of the business document, it says like, well, if you like, I can draft something a little bit longer or a little bit different. Like they haven't even cut and paste that stuff out. You gotta be the human in the loop. It can take an expert and make them just ginormously productive. But what it can't do is take somebody who's a complete novice and then make them an expert. You can get sort of directional ideas and a directional way of thinking about things, but you can't become an instant expert just because you have access to an AI tool.
I might have some questions over here, and here I'm going to mention about training gaps and skills, of course. ISC too, of course, reports major skill gaps in incident and in incident response and AI. Where is? Could you please tell us where is training most disconnected from real world incidents?
The answer is everywhere. That's the short answer.
Yeah.
Let's drill into that a little bit though. So number one, security teams. That is a good example where a lot of times CISOs will say like, I can't find the right people. I can't hire, for this, but they also sit in that job for 5 years without training anybody.
Yeah.
And what happens is it's like in 5 years time, you can get a lot out of people, right? Like you can actually get quite a lot out of people and actually invest in their training. If you haven't done that, 5 years are going to go by, you're going to have the same exact people and you're going to have the same exact complaints. You can't find anybody. I'd rather have somebody who is really ambitious, really smart, trying to learn and then support that. That can get you a great team. It doesn't happen overnight, right? Like it happens over time, but that's one piece of the puzzle. And I think it's an important piece. Now, the other piece might be employee training. And I see this all the time.
Yeah, that's a big issue.
Yeah. And employee training is first of all, it's a tricky topic because it is so culturally dependent, right? Like, will this work here?
Yeah.
Not just like, will it work? So it's hard to pick up a book and just say like, okay, they said to do this and I'm going to go do that, right? Like, it's like, will that work here? You have to understand your own culture. One thing that I think I see all the time is really, just kind of generic training and they send too much of it. So rather than, first of all, just understanding what do people need to know and making sure that we're actually telling them that. Like if you have 5 days a week in the office, why are you training them to be secure at home? You should really just kind of make sure, is the training that we're sending them, is it necessary? Is it sufficient? And then we get into things like developer training. And I mean, I can say like when you have super smart developers, like the real senior folks, right? And you're sending them, hey, don't trust input, right? Like don't trust user input, stuff like that. I mean, they disengage almost immediately. They have no interest in doing it. And yet when we spend a lot more time on it and say, what do they need to know? And we were able to kind of co-develop training that's actually like it's in the language that they're using. It's in the the coding languages like that, and using the same tools. Suddenly, it became like this helps me do my job. And when we can answer that question, when we could say, does this training help you do your job? And the answer is yes. Suddenly, training's not such the burden that it always seems to be. Because I mean, too many times we'll send out an annual course and it's just like, oh, it's a half an hour, it's an hour or something like that. People are just kind of clicking through as fast as they can. Did they retain any of that information? Probably not. And then we also have to resist the urge to over-educate. And I see that on boards. I see that with employees. I mean, it's just like you're trying to teach people everything you know about cybersecurity, which may be a lot. but you're also throwing around acronyms. You're just trying to educate too much, too fast. Again, cognitive load, right? Like I can take in a couple examples, but my brain's going to get a little tired after a bit. I can't learn 100 things in a single board meeting. And you have to resist that temptation to do that and sort of back it off and say, like, I'll give you an example, but the number one thing, I mean, we had a company once where we were doing a tabletop in a business. They did not know how to report a security incident. And I'm like, well, if you haven't taught them that is, I mean, if you don't teach them anything else, they need to know how to report a security incident, right? Like, so, I mean, we have to really take a giant step back and say, like, let's be pragmatic. What can we realistically teach? What do they have to know? What would it be nice if they knew? And then also, are we doing that in a feedback loop? Like if people are losing laptops routinely, are we building that into our training and awareness? Like, how do you report a lost laptop? How do you kind of keep track of it in the first place? Those are the kind of things that make training a much more, and it's one of the few areas where CISOs get to be creative. So, I mean, I'm surprised more people don't jump on this. They just kind of say, canned annual training, and they don't worry about it. It's like, this is an area where you can be a little bit more creative in terms of how do we get the message across. So I'm surprised more people don't take them up on it, but it's an important topic.
Do you think, I mean...
You can't train everybody.
Yeah, I get it, that part. But do you think... if we have education and training, do you think we still need the security awareness? Because some other companies says, I think security awareness it's enough by doing the trainings or the education. But I don't know. I think security awareness should be everywhere, in every department.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds good, but you have to make sure that it really is there.
Yeah.
The number one thing I'm seeing now, especially, is people debating whether phishing our employees is really worthwhile or not. I mean, I think that's probably the number one that I see up there.
Indeed.
And I see lots of people saying, like, oh, it's a waste of time, don't bother. I personally don't believe that it's a waste of time, because I think ultimately, but people focus on the wrong thing. I'd rather have a phishing program like that. And instead of worrying about why is my click rate 6 or 7%, sometimes it's 12, 20, 30%, right? Like really scary numbers.
Yeah, indeed.
But the reality is if the rate was 0, that means your fishes were too easy. And you can't necessarily, it depends on the quality of the fish. Now, what is more important is training people to actually report the fish. Because when you have, like, let's say a 5-6% click rate, which is actually pretty good, what you want is you want employees who are used to reporting the fish, because 5 or 6% is still going to bite you, right? But I mean, if you have people who are going to report the fish routinely, that will protect you from the people who click on every single link that lands on their inbox, right? In a real fish, it's going to protect you.
Yeah, true. I remember you proposed virtual cyber apprenticeships years ago. Please correct me if I'm wrong over here.
Yeah.
How to avoid turning certs into checkbox exercises? Yeah,
no, that's a great question. And I still work with a company called IQ4. And they do virtual cybersecurity apprenticeships. I'm an advisor for the company. I really like their approach to things, which is that they go into lower served, lesser served populations, and they help you become cyber people, not by just doing training, but also by doing practical hands-on type of things, mentoring. So people like myself get on and we actually talk to students. And I think that that's really important. Ask me anything kind of stuff. And also really just making sure that when they do a project, like they actually do hands-on capstone projects, things like that, that we are there over their shoulder critiquing them. Because I mean, a lot of times you'll see students well-meaning and they'll say something like, well, then I would tell the press this, right? Like, and it's like, no, let's back that up. And most companies have a PR firm, things like that. And you can't just necessarily start engaging the media. We're there for that sanity check that you just don't get in textbooks. And then the other piece to it, which is an important piece, is really just its skills-based training, right? So what we had done with the virtual apprenticeship in Connecticut was we were actually able to engage employers and say, what are you looking to hire? And the answer was, typically SOC analysts, first-year analysts, things like that. And we actually worked with them to be able to say, what skills do those people have, including soft skills? And then we're able to train for that. And then at the end of it, the employers are able to say, like, I'm going to take these 3, right? Like, I mean, it's like a really good model, much better than, even some of the colleges and universities that we work at, where it's like, we're here to give you the degree, not help you find a job.
Okay.
So trying to match skills and learning to actual like hands-on activities that you can translate directly into a business need, which is the job on the other end. That's a very, very cool model.
Okay, interesting. Boards increasingly mandate certification after breaches. How to avoid turning certs? How to avoiding turning certs into checkbox exercises? But over here, I think we talk about this. I want to understand more on the skills gaps, and over there with global skills gaps widening. What metrics actually show whether training is working?
Okay, so what metrics show that? What kind of training? Employee training?
It's one of them, because this is the main focus.
Yep. I would say that first of all, you need to match your metrics. I see people who just still do metrics programs, like they'll just measure whatever they can, and then they report everything, right? And it's just like, no, you need to give your metrics a job. And I'm a firm believer in that. So the job of metrics is either to tell a story, to drive a behavior, to kind of show progress. I mean, it needs to have a job. And if you're reporting metrics that you can't understand what the heck the job of that metric is, it's probably a bad metric, and you probably want to swap it out with something. Ultimately, what we want to do is we want to see, like, are people reporting phishes more? I'll give you a quick example, because we did do this. One of the jobs as CISOs is we need to make the friction with employees. We need to balance that very carefully, right? Like, we did deploy things like multi-factor authentication, and it's really great from a security perspective. It is now harder to log in. So we have to make all those kind of balances. But one of the things that we should be doing is making sure that, as an example, we wanted to encourage people to report the fish, right? Like, I mean, we were just talking about that. And we made it hard. We made it really hard. I mean, we have to attach it to a separate email, and you have to include all the headers, and then you have to send it to some address that even we can't remember what the address is. We have to look my team had to look it up. I was like, nope, we got to fix that. And we just changed it to phishing at, very quickly, and we made it a little bit easier. But then we got a tool where it was one-click reporting. And we really drilled home, like, if you see a suspected fish, one-click reporting, click that report button. And then the next phishing exercise, we had 1,000 people report the fish, wow. Right? And again, when someone reports the fish, if it's a real fish, you've just given us a great heads up, right? Like, that's something that now the security team can go back. We might be able to pull messages from inboxes before that 5% starts clicking on things, right? You can actually pull it out of their inbox. And I mean, that's the kind of metrics you really want to be tracking. Like, are we driving the right behaviors, and are people actually changing?
Aaron, do you have any questions?
Yeah, actually, let's move over a little bit. And Bonnie, if you kind of want to help me cover this too, let's talk about CISO empowerment and leadership. We're kind of seeing now more CISOs hold executive titles, but authority often lags responsibility. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How can bluff-style communication help CISOs gain real influence in the organization?
Oh, that's a great question. I have to say, first of all, a bluff, bottom line up front, just so everybody's kind of on board with what that term means. But I mean, if you've ever heard of like pyramid principle, things like that, it really means like the same way that a newspaper story starts with the headline. The headline might tell you practically everything in the story. The first paragraph tells you almost everything else you need to know. And if you want to keep reading, you keep reading. But a lot of people skim newspapers, right? That's exactly how busy executives tend to think. It's like, am I interested in this story? Do I want to go deeper? And you got to give them the opportunity to just sort of bail out on that. But, bottom line up front is really so important, because a lot of times, I'll give you an example. I mean, I've been in front of CIOs who are traveling all the time. They're busy. They're doing 100 different things. And you finally have one-on-one time with them, but you didn't get to your point, and they just got pulled out in an emergency, right? Now you're stuck. You got to reschedule. You just lost a week, right? Or maybe more. Trying to get that bottom line up front and then let them drive the conversation. I used to have a CIO and you just could not figure out which way he was going to go. So you had to be ready either way. Sometimes you give him the bottom line up front and you would say, this is what's happening. And he'd be like, great, you got it. Go do, right? Other times it would be like, whoa, wait a minute. And he wants to go into more detail. But by getting that bottom line up front, a lot of people, they like to build to a giant, like we're building up to something and I'll get there in a few minutes. People don't have a few minutes. They don't want to have a few minutes. They want you to get to the point quick. And then I would say, let them drive. How much detail do you want? Do you want to know more about this? We can go more into it. We can go deeper. And if not, we can move on to the next subject because it's really important. I can't stress enough how busy everybody is, right? And trying to, we're just one thing that our bosses have to worry about. And they may have 100 different things they need to worry about. So get to the point quickly, get to the point clearly. And then, either, like I said, either you're drilling in more on the details or you're moving on to the next point.
Well, and, if I can piggyback on that a little bit, it's also, what kind of, I would even say, soft skill kind of training should CISOs be looking at? Because we get promoted because we're technically good at things. And so we just keep taking our technically good up higher and higher with us sometimes. Not necessarily because we know how to manage or lead. How many times have you asked somebody what time it was and they told you how to make a watch? So it's like, no, I don't care about the watch. Just tell me what time it is. What kind of, training have you seen out there, or what kind of experiences help build CISOs to that level where they really are C-suite worthy, if you will?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, a while back, I would have said CEB, which I guess is now part of Gartner. And they used to do things like the IT Challenger courses, stuff like that. But I don't see enough of it anymore. Like I don't see enough people like spending time on the soft skills. That said, you can sort of roll your own program, because I'll tell you right now, your number one superpower, and I talk about that a little in the book, Communication Superpowers. If you are the one actually listening to what people are saying and engaging with the conversation, a lot of times people are going in, they're sitting there thinking about what should I say next? What should I say after that? They're all focused on themselves rather than like actually listening to like, wait, what did he just say? That is a communication superpower, because, like I said, a lot of people, they get the answer wrong because they're not really engaged in the first place. That is a practice, right? The same way that with the people that we talk to, they're busy. They have things going through your head. Do you think we don't have things going through our head? Sure we do. We need to be able to actually active listen. And people hear active listening and it's just like, oh, it sounds like something I need to read in a textbook or something. It's like, no, just care about what people are saying and actually stop for a minute, put down your email and actually listen to what they're saying and engage in the conversation. And that will take you really, really far. That is a practice. You can't get that 100%. I don't get it 100% every day, right? Like, we do our best, but I mean, like, yeah, there's times you sort of drift off and you say like, oh, I don't know, I wasn't paying attention. You can't have that as your default. You are now like not paying attention to your life unfolding in front of you. So you want to make sure that you actually are engaging in these kind of things. And a huge part of communication is listening.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I would say even from the perspective of CISO, a huge part of leading an organization is teaching people how to lead behind you.
Yeah.
Not just telling them what to do. So, I mean, growing your troops means that you also have to grow your own skills.
Yeah. Yeah. And grow your staff too, right? Like, I mean, for me, I knew I was ready when I managed for the first time, and that was probably back in the 90s or something. But I mean, like my boss had spent a lot more time with me because he knew I had potential, and we worked together, and I sort of was able to like kind of anticipate like how would Brian answer this, right? Like, and I mean, I was always, just kind of watching over his shoulder, and it's like, and eventually I got to the point where it was like, I'm not sure that would have been my answer. And, that's when I knew I was actually ready to start figuring this stuff out on my own. We don't spend enough time, like leaders are busy and they don't want to really think about transitioning and then bringing up the next generation and making sure, but it pays dividends, right? Like if my team gets better at actually talking to people, If my team gets better at actually engaging and listening and working with other people, you have just scaled yourself, right? Like now it doesn't have to be like, well, I need to be in every important conversation. I mean, that was one of the big things I had when I hired a deputy was like that deputy needs to be able to sit in for me. If they can't, they're not really, I don't care how much technical you have. You need to be able to speak to commissioners. You need to be able to speak to business leaders. And if you can't do that, then it's not really a good backup, right? Or you need to train somebody up into that. We don't spend enough time actually thinking about like, how do I train up the next generation? How do I work with them closer in a way that, it feels like work up front, but actually on the back end of things just get easier and easier because your team elevates.
Well, so what I hear you saying is CISO doesn't mean bad leader. CISO can mean leader.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And so it's what, basic leadership skills to some degree.
Yeah. And I mean, as CISOs, we have to also accept that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room all the time. I mean, and I've seen people that they just don't want to answer something or they want to just have an answer, even if it's the wrong answer. And there's nothing worse than somebody who has a confidently wrong answer, right? Like, I mean, I'd rather see you say like, I don't know, but I have people who do. Or I don't know, but I'll get back to you. Confidently having the wrong answer is a very dangerous thing, especially in cybersecurity.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, Aaron, I'm gonna segue back to you again.
Sure. You actually talked about your boss. How important do you think it is to have a mentor when you're moving up?
I think it's critical. It's absolutely not only when you're moving up, but all the time. I mean, I still have people today that I would call if I ran into something that is just like, I need someone to talk me off the ledge. Things happen like that. Having somebody, a sounding board of some kind, right? Like, I mean, whether it's that board mentor, whether it's somebody else in the organization. I used to work in a company that had a formal mentoring program. No matter what level you were when you came in, and you could be a VP, an EVP, you could be all kinds of things, managing director, you still were assigned a mentor to help you get grounded in the company faster, right? Like learn the culture quicker. And, the mentor, again, psychological safety. It was supposed to be that, like, we go out to lunch, we leave the office, we talk, you say, I'm having problems with my boss, things like that. And they're able to give you kind of a sounding board in a safe place, right? Like you don't want it to be in a not safe place. And not every conversation you can have, even if you have a great boss, you don't necessarily want to have every conversation only with your boss. It's really, really helpful to have somebody else to go to. And I think it's critical in the first couple of years, but I mean, I think if you're smart, you're going to keep some level of a mentor your entire life.
So we only have, we have 9 minutes left. And I'll have one more question here before we'll move to the closing. But you notice supply chain risk and geopolitical pressure are definitely rising.
Yeah.
How can CISOs use these challenges to become strategic partners?
Yeah, it's a great question because I especially when you talk about third-party risk, that one is just so tough because it's not third-party risk. It's something that we knew in finance for quite some time now. It's fourth party, it's tertiary. It's not the vendor that you made a deal with, it's their vendor that they made a deal with, right? And that becomes very complicated very quickly. And we have to be practical about that and what we can do. But I mean, a lot of times, I see CISOs sending out questionnaires and things like that even they don't believe in, right? Like a lot of that stuff's wishful thinking, and it comes back and it says, oh, 100% of our machines are encrypted. Everything has this, everything has that. It's like, CISOs, you can always tell because we hardly ever talk in absolutes. When you say all or everything, we immediately start cringing and say, wait a minute. Right? Like,
it's a scientific mind. No
absolutes. Yeah, when you tell me 100% are encrypted, I'm like, really? Is that right?
Yeah.
Right? Because there's always some executive laptop that's in their kid's drawer at school or something that hasn't seen the network in 6 months. I mean, it's like, really, is everything, right? Like, and that is a tip off, right? That's a tip off on like, you're probably doing wishful thinking again.
So Alex, why don't we we have now 7 minutes left. Alex, if you want to kind of, and Bonnie, if you kind of want to do some of the closing questions, that'd be great.
Yep, that's great.
Bonnie, you want?
Yes.
Please.
I just need to unmute myself, that's all. Absolutely. So, I mean, I'll just say, I spent a lot of time in my second career now coaching executives and leaders on different ways of being. When you think about, how you balance this, and I don't even know if it's balance the stress of your job with the stress of home. I mean, what are some of your strategies for like walking away from it for whatever period of time you can to allow yourself to recharge?
Yeah, great question. And I think that probably you need to find something to help yourself self-regulate. Now, when I say that, I mean there's so many answers to that question. You need to find something that actually speaks to you, that you like. And it could be anything from meditation to kickboxing, right? Like, I mean, you just need something to kind of get a little bit of the stress out. For me, I do a number of things like that. I actually do both meditation and kickboxing. But I mean, you need to be able to have some level of just disconnecting, burning off a little bit of stress. And then also, I think it's important to establish two things. One is a morning routine and one is an evening routine. So in the morning, as an example, I never go into email first thing. I never do that. And the reason is because that can set the tone for the entire day. Like, oh my God, I can't believe this person said that, right? Like now I got to jump in and I got to start writing back. And now the tone for the day has changed. So I tend to own my mornings very aggressively. I started out in my own way. It includes exercise, things like that. And then when I get to email, I'm ready for it. Now, the other thing where I wasn't so good at was evening routines, where I would just kind of keep going, right? Like, and I eventually learned that is the law of diminishing returns. You will hit a point where it's like, okay, you've been working all day, you've gotten a lot done. Now you're going to work an extra hour, extra 2 hours, extra 3 hours. You're getting less and less done per hour invested, and it's just not worth it. I mean, it's really kind of trying to establish those personal boundaries where and make sure you're taking vacation, right? Like way too many of us are just like, well, I didn't really get a vacation. I'm guilty of that too sometimes, but I really think about it. And try to make sure that not only am I taking vacation, but if I have a team, that they're taking vacation too, and that they're not on email, getting on calls, things like that. A lot of times as CISOs, it's like you end up on 3-4 calls on a week off, and suddenly it doesn't feel like a week off at all. It feels like just working from home.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I mean, the last thing I want to hear somebody say is, well, I'll just get up earlier in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, wait a minute, stop. I mean, we're already all sleep deprived. Can we not do that? I mean, how could you manage within the day that you already have to find that time for yourself?
Sleep is really important. And the other thing I would also say is active recovery. So like in the evenings, you can sit down and watch Netflix, et cetera. That's not active, that's passive recovery, right? But I mean, go play an instrument, go take a walk. Those are active recovery, and they tend to really work a lot better. Sleep is part of that too. And I mean, just making sure you try to get a full night of sleep, that's really important, because there's plenty as a CISO that keeps you up at night, and you want to make sure that it's not actually keeping you up at night. Why? So that you come back tomorrow stronger than you were today.
Well, I like that when you said, don't be on your email. I mean,
Yeah.
as somebody who said to a 7-year-old, turn your tablet off and go to bed.
Oh, yeah.
Turn your tablet off, pick up a book, go read for a few minutes.
Spend time with family.
That's right. Yeah, there you
Just
go.
shut off and spend time with family.
Yeah.
Important. Very
That's
important.
what it's all about.
Okay. Thank you.
I do have the last question. If you had to sum up modern cybersecurity leadership in one sentence, what would it be?
Ooh.
That's a tough one to end on, but I would say
Alex throwing the hard one out.
and that's okay. I actually have I think a good answer to that. But I mean, honestly, my view on it is we need to earn our C-level titles. One of the biggest scourges has been we call people chief information security officer, and then they're not really a C-level executive. And you see this a lot in corporations where the real C-level executives are the CEO, sometimes the COO, the chief operating officer, sometimes the CFO, and then you start getting into chief data officers and stuff like that, and you're just kind of like, they're not really C-level executives, right? And I mean, we need to earn the seat at the table. For the business to treat us as a C-level executive, we need to understand how the business operates. We need to be able to talk in the language of so what, right? Like, so what business outcomes, things like that, and lose some of the tech talk, right? Which is, it's hard for some of us. We spend a lot of time learning all these acronyms. We want to share them. We want to show everybody how smart we are. Show them that you're smart by dumbing it down.
Soon we'll have chief AI officer, because I have seen very often this role, I think, in the last 2 months.
I used to work at a company where they had so many C-level executives, they started calling people czars. like dinosaurs and stuff like that. I mean, it's just like, when do we run out of C-level titles?
So our time is almost up. Jeff, do me a favor. If you can want to promote anything you're currently working on, how can people get access to your book? Anything you want to say, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, very good, very good. So I am. You can actually catch both of my books on Amazon.com. Again, the cybersecurity leaders communication playbook, as well as leading the digital workforce. And I am working on a new title that should probably be out in a year or so, but it is on the human side, right? So I'm actually going to be spending a lot of time on the human side of cybersecurity. It looks like it's going to be a real interesting title. I'm going to call it Heroes and Villains.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Awesome.
And what I'll do is I'll put the links, so everyone knows, I'll put the links to the books in the comments so people have access to it.
Appreciate it.
And Bonnie, like always, thank you so much. Alex, like always, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I'm going to end here. If they want to stay on for a second, that'd be great.